Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, August the 11th, 2025. Today, Mercury goes stationary direct. At the same time, we have got a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. Okay, for most of us, if we're outside the Americas, certainly this Venus-Jupiter conjunction will be tomorrow on Tuesday the 12th, but I think I'm going to look at this conjunction today. That sort of gives us some time to think about what this conjunction might mean. So those are my main topics for the day: Mercury going stationary direct and the conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. But before I focus on these two events, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, August the 11th. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, if appropriate. And so turning to this chart, the moon is in Pisces. So the moon is going to be in Pisces all day. And, it's great that the moon is in Pisces. The moon is in a water sign. It is conjunct the North Node. And it is in mutual reception to Jupiter. The moon is in Pisces, a sign ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in Cancer, a sign ruled by the moon. So, these two planets are in mutual reception. And this provides some emotional flow, and also you could argue that it's quite lucky. Not just because the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter, but additionally because the moon is making trine aspects to Venus and Jupiter. So this evening or tomorrow, depending on where you are, there's a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter in Cancer, and today the moon is picking up on this conjunction. Moon makes trine to Venus, makes a trine to Jupiter, and these are really very fortunate aspects. So you could argue that today's going to be great. I mean, why not? And yes, the moon conjunct the North Node. When exactly is the moon conjunct the North Node? You could argue, when the moon is in Pisces, it's in the same sign as the North Node, and so the moon could be our emotional responses, and perhaps our emotional responses are often correct. We sort of wonder about our feelings. Our feelings can, in certain situations, lead us in the wrong direction. But today, with the moon conjunct the North Node, maybe not. Maybe whatever we feel is the right way to feel, and this may also apply to the way we express our feelings. So you could argue that today really is pretty fortunate. Now, this doesn't take away from the fact that we've still got the after effects of Mars opposition Saturn, Mars opposition Pluto. So over the last few days, Mars, having gone into Libra, made an opposition to Saturn, made an opposition to Neptune. So these are difficult aspects, and it's certainly nice that Venus is conjunct Jupiter, but we have to balance that with the influence of Mars opposition Jupiter. So perhaps things are getting easier. Some of the recent tension has dissipated, and I'm making this video on Sunday, the 10th, and so I don't quite know what's going to happen on Monday because I'm not here yet. But I'm making this video as if it's Monday. But we don't really know fully how these things are going to develop, and we also shouldn't forget that Mercury is going direct, and today, with Mercury going direct, I think it happens at sort of 8:29 a.m. London time. That's happening just after a full moon. And so that Mercury direct, it's not an unusual event, but it is. But being so close to the full moon today might be a cycle change. You've got two cycles changing. We've got the moon moving into a sort of a waning state. The full moon having now passed, Mercury now going direct. So that change can create sort of some pressure and sort of some tectonic plates in the collective unconscious can slightly shift. And so a lot of people may not be sure which way things are going. And it could be that optimism and pessimism, they shift quickly, they cycle quickly. So I'm not saying that everything is going to be absolutely fine. There's still a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, and we shouldn't forget that Mars is still opposition both Saturn and Neptune. Now, if you are into fixed stars, this Venus-Jupiter conjunction takes place on Sirius. And Sirius, it's sometimes suggested, but I don't pay enough attention to Sirius. I mean, Sirius is a very important star. It certainly was very important to the sort of ancient Egyptians, and it was the dog star, wasn't it? Sirius, at around 13 Cancer. And so, what is Sirius about? So the general view seems to be that Sirius is a fortunate influence. It's if we look at Vivian Robson, The Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology, he says of Sirius, which is Canis Majoris, the greater dog, a binary star, brilliant white and yellow, situated in the mouth of the greater dog, from Sirius, sparkling or scorching, or according to some authors, from the Egyptian god Osiris. Among these people, it was also Thoth and Sophis, and formed the basis of the Sothic period of chronology. The Chinese knew it as Xin Lang, the heavenly wolf, and said that when unusually bright, it portended attacks from thieves. So we maybe shouldn't forget that. Maybe if someone is a thief or is dishonest, things might unfortunately work in their favour. And there is support for that if we look at the midpoints that Venus and Jupiter is on. But I'll be looking at the midpoints that Venus Jupiter are on sort of later in the video. And its influence, according to Ptolemy, it's of the nature of Jupiter and Mars. It gives honour, renown, wealth, ardour, faithfulness, devotion, passion, and resentment, and makes its natives custodians, curators, and guardians. Now, not the only problem, but certainly one problem of Sirius can be dog bites. So it also gives danger of dog bites. That perhaps would be more if you had Mars or Saturn on Sirius. Venus, Jupiter, am I going to be vulnerable to dog bites? Well, our dog just had a third birthday, so she's calming down. She doesn't take sort of chunks out of my flesh anymore, not like when she was a puppy, but maybe I need to watch out for that. Now, as far as what it means for Venus and Jupiter to be on Sirius, Robson is pretty optimistic about this. Venus, ease, comfort and luxury, extravagant, gain by inheritance. Jupiter, business success, journeys, help from relatives, ecclesiastical preferment. So if you're a priest and you want to be promoted to bishop, maybe today might be your day, or tomorrow maybe, when the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is exact. But I don't think many priests are watching this video. So I would have said that Venus-Jupiter's proximity to Sirius does give it a boost and makes it more of an exceptional conjunction. But I'm perhaps, to be honest, somewhat uneasy with describing Venus-Jupiter conjunctions, a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. I think the problem is that I'm more comfortable, as you might have noticed if you've been watching these videos, talking about aspects which are more negative, like Mars-Saturn conjunctions. And Venus-Jupiter I'm supposed to be positive about Venus-Jupiter. I'm supposed to say nice things about it, and maybe I find that rather difficult. Even though I've got a Venus-Jupiter trine in my own chart. I mean, talking about my own chart, by the way, I'm just in this Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Well, no, I'll talk about my own chart very briefly at the end of the video. I just want to demonstrate how this Venus-Jupiter conjunction affects me, but I'm not important. There are other far more important charts to consider. For example, the chart of the United States, and this Venus-Jupiter certainly affects the US. But that's the overall position. Let's just quickly look at the situation if we set the chart not for New York, but we set it for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia. And the moon is earlier in the sign. The moon is at 11 degrees Pisces. And that may not be such a bad thing because, you know, the moon is certainly making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. But that trine between Venus and Jupiter is probably going to be stronger in Australasia than in the Americas because it happens at the right time of day. You know, it happens in the middle of the day, probably sort of early afternoon, during the working day. You don't have to get up too early to experience the Moon Venus-Jupiter conjunction, so it is fully available to you. Or if you're in Australasia, if you're in the Americas, it's still available to you, but you might have to work somewhat harder. And then there is the heliocentric view, looking at everything from the perspective of the Sun, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. And there is a quincunx between Mars and Jupiter. So Mars in Libra is quincunx Uranus in Taurus. Now that quincunx would have been stronger sort of over the weekend. I mean, looking at what's been happening over the weekend so far, I mean, as I said, I'm making this video on Sunday morning. I don't think I've seen anything dramatically horrible. And of course, a lot of talk about Trump and his meeting with Putin in Alaska, but I wouldn't relate that to Mars quincunx Uranus. And at the same time, well, you might say that Mars is sort of making a quincunx to Saturn. So Mars has just been on the Saturn-Uranus midpoint, and that has created a lot of tension and strife. And again, that could be about people working out the implications of this meeting in Alaska. So that may be a manifestation of it. I don't see anything, hugely important as far as other aspects are concerned. Earth is square Venus. So there's Earth at 1914 Aquarius, Venus at 1812 Taurus. This is another aspect which was exact over the weekend, but it's still in force on Monday. And Earth square Venus might be indulgent, somewhat indulgent, particularly as it's connected with Mercury and Venus. So you've got Mercury sextile Venus, and the Earth is semi-sextile Mercury, and of course Earth is square Venus, and so there is perhaps a lot to spend money on, but we don't have to spend that money. That is rather unnecessary. So that could be a manifestation of it, but there might just also be things to say with Earth semi-sextile Mercury, and Mercury still hitting at Venus. There are things that we should be saying, things which can make the world a better place, and perhaps if we're given the right chances, we can express our creativity in a way that is very, very constructive, and people will really understand what we're talking about. But we have to have the courage to be free and open. So that is a possibility. But overall, the heliocentric picture doesn't strike me as being especially exciting. So let me now turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, August the 11th, 2025. Aries, you may be of a view that there is not anything in particular that needs to be done. In theory, you could be, out there being the initiator, but is it necessary? There's a lot to think about. There's a lot to take on board. Things have happened which may not always have run in your favour. You're still perhaps recovering from the fact that Mars is opposition Saturn and Mars is also opposition Neptune. Now, that Mars-Saturn opposition is now in the past. It's reached peak strength, but you're still feeling it, and there are still sort of lingering frustrations around you, things that you would really like to do. You wanted to do them, but the time wasn't right, and so you're perhaps cautious. Maybe you have tried something and it didn't work, and you are wondering whether it's really worth your while giving it another go. But you shouldn't be too negative. Things are changing, and the moon is quite soon going to go into Aries, and tomorrow, Tuesday, moon will go into Aries, and that's something to look forward to. And as far as today is concerned, well, Mercury is going stationary direct, and Mercury going stationary direct, may work in your favour. And perhaps if you look back over the last 3 weeks, there was something you wanted to do, something that was just special for you. It was something about who you were, who you are, and how you can be creative, and you wanted to make it happen. But for one reason or another, it didn't happen, or you just weren't in the mood, or you were distracted, and it felt at the time it might have been a shame, but you had other things on your plate. But now Mercury is going direct, in Leo, a sign which is very sympathetic to your sign. And so if there's some creative activity that you've been putting on hold for the last 3 weeks, or you'd even given up on it, then now might be the chance to put it into action. And you don't have to tell anyone what you're doing, but you can slowly sort of pick up the pieces, or perhaps work out where you left things off. Because 3 weeks, it's a long time, but it's not so long that you've forgotten a memory and that you don't know where to start. But you have to get going on it. Mercury is not going to be in Leo forever. I think Mercury stays in Leo until, is it September the 12th? When does Mercury move out of Leo? It's it's earlier than that. It's September the 2nd. So you haven't got all the time in the world. So between now and September the 2nd, there may be something that you can really get going on that you'd forgotten about, and so that's something you can work on. Now, sort of going back to your overall stance today, this Mars Saturn opposition, I still think it is there, and it's still sort of influencing you, and it's still confusing you, because Mars is also making an opposition to Neptune, and now that it's Monday, the beginning of a new week, perhaps over the weekend you could sort of forget about it, and because you didn't have those kind of pressures. But now it's a new week, you have to interact with the world and its problems, and you can see that things aren't necessarily easy, and it could be a struggle to get through to certain people, and maybe there are certain people who have a thin skin. It's easy to upset them, not just by what you do, but by what you don't do. And because of other people's sensitivity, you might want to be careful. It might be like you're sort of walking on eggshells, and many Arians are not very good at walking on eggshells. They like to be open and direct, and in the process they can be quite noisy. But at the moment, Aries, the less noise the better. I think that's certainly the case. Now, one aspect we do have is a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. Now, this Venus and Jupiter conjunction may not be exact until tomorrow, but it's pretty exact at the moment. And the Moon is making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. And this trine can work out for you. Again, you have to be subtle, and as far as where this trine can manifest, it could manifest as far in terms of your home, your family, and perhaps relationships as well. But certain types of relationships which are sort of a new and not particularly stable, where there's a lot of competition and winners and losers. I don't think that moon trine Venus, moon trine Jupiter is going to be especially useful. If you're talking about existing relationships where there is already an emphasis on stability, where there is sort of permanence, then that moon trine Venus and moon trine Jupiter could be very helpful. And with Venus conjunct Jupiter, that may be saying something about another person. I mean, it could be anyone, but it's more likely to be someone you know well, and someone who, in their own way, is quite fortunate and maybe self-contained. And if you treat them in the right way, then they will return the favour. But it's just very important that you are subtle, and it's about having respect and sensitivity, and appreciating another person's sensitivities. So if you can do that, then I do think that the moon trine Venus and Jupiter can really be very helpful for you. And one other thing with this Venus Jupiter conjunction, it might be a time where things connected with property, real estate, regardless of whether you own property or you rent property or you're looking to rent or buy property, things connected with real estate and homes and land might be able to work for you. Not just today and into tomorrow as well. And I'll probably be talking about Venus Jupiter conjunction when I do your horoscope for Tuesday. But it is something for you to think about. But you don't have to rush around, and it just could be through a subtle approach you can do something relating to land or property, which can be quite stabilizing. Taurus. There is now a build-up to a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. Now, this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, it may take place tomorrow, may take place today. I mean, if you're in the Americas, it could happen, late this evening. I mean, as far as when this Venus-Jupiter conjunction is exact, it's exact. Just to remind myself, it's exact on at 6:30 a.m. sort of London time. So if you're in California, then the Venus-Jupiter aspect is going to be this evening on Monday. If you're in, on British Columbia, Oregon, or Alaska, Hawaii. So if you're in that part of the world, it's about this evening. If you're elsewhere, it'll be tomorrow. But it's so close, Taurus, that you've got to be feeling it. You really must be feeling it. I hope you're feeling it. And what it means is Venus is your ruler. It's making a conjunction to Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of good fortune, and Jupiter is extra fortunate. because it's in the sign of its exaltation, and the moon is in neutral reception to Jupiter. So I'm thinking and hoping that this Venus-Jupiter conjunction can really work for you. Now, we have to be very careful here, because you might like me to be a magician. I'm not a magician. I can't make things better for you. I really can't. I can't change the course of things, but I can, point out to you that it is a time of opportunity, and it's up to you to really make the most of it. And you will not be in a situation, I don't think, where good fortune is going to be handed to you on a silver plate, but there are opportunities there, and the more opportunities you can create, and the more positive and proactive you can be, the greater the chance of you being able to take advantage of this Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And this Venus-Jupiter conjunction may be quite verbal. It may be a lot to do with what you say, what you write, and perhaps also where you go, the places you visit, the places you choose to visit. And so, Taurus, if you were to do nothing today, you don't go out of your home, don't answer the phone, then quite possibly this Venus-Jupiter conjunction is just going to not work at all. It might even be rather disappointing. It might sort of give you a sort of hollow feeling. But if you are always looking for things to happen, you're here, there, and everywhere. You're talking to this person, that person, and you're making the most of everyone you know. Then it's a different picture. And I think that this Venus-Jupiter conjunction can really work for you, and you should be looking for respect and perhaps preferment, because this Venus-Jupiter conjunction is on the fixed star Sirius, and so Sirius, the dog star, in general, it's a fairly fortunate star, and it's a large star. I think Sirius is the largest. It's certainly one of the largest stars from the Earth's perspective, and so with Venus-Jupiter making this aspect, well, not just to Sirius but to each other, what you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do? And that does create a challenge for you. So if you just plan to do nothing on today and tomorrow, then that shouldn't be an option, and that perhaps isn't an excuse. It might be, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it might be a lazy summer, the summer doldrums, but it shouldn't be the doldrums. If you are active, maybe it'll work in your favor, the fact that other people are doing other stuff. They may be on a holiday, they may be just watching the clouds go by, but if you can be active and just take every opportunity to maximize your luck, then I think that things really can work for you. And it is possible, Taurus, and I hate to say this, but you may in certain situations be able to benefit from another person's misfortune. It's not your fault. It's not that you're causing a problem. It's not that you've caused the damage. It just might be that someone's in trouble, needs help, needs you to do something. So it might be a great day if you're a plumber or you're an electrician having to deal with someone's domestic mishaps. But there are other ways in which you can take advantage of other people's misfortunes, and it's not a bad thing to be doing necessarily, because you are potentially fixing a problem. And so perhaps that can be one way you can look at yourself, as someone who can fix problems. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are taking money from someone. You can just be around and you can address bad things in a positive way, and that's okay, and it's up to you how you respond. And in the end, you can make things better for yourself, but you can also make things better for other people. Now, with the moon making trine aspect to Venus and Jupiter, that probably bodes well for relationships. I don't think that today is necessarily going to be great for sort of one-to-one relationships, because although I think today can be a really, really good, you shouldn't forget that Mars is still making an opposition to Saturn, and Mars may say something about what happens if you spend long periods of time with one person who knows you very well, who perhaps knows your weaknesses very well. Under those circumstances, it could be that the wrong person could really spoil your luck. Even the right person could spoil your luck if you spend too much time with them. So as far as other people are concerned, you want to be able to keep your options open. And so strong, intense relationships should, in most cases, be avoided. It's not necessarily that anything bad is going to happen. It just could be that you would miss an opportunity, and that would be a shame, because overall, Taurus, I think today can be really good. Gemini. Mercury is going direct. So Mercury has been going backwards for the last 3 weeks, at least from the Earth's perspective. And now, today, at sort of 8:29 a.m. London time, Mercury goes stationary direct. So Mercury comes to a standstill. You can see in the chart for noon New York, Mercury no longer has an R next to it. So it's no longer retrograde. And if you're a Gemini, that change of direction is good. It means that you can be more decisive and dynamic. And if things haven't always been working over the last 3 weeks, you've sort of felt really frustrated, or perhaps if you've lost something, it might turn up. And so I'm not no promises there, but if you've really given up on finding something and it has disappeared over the last 3 weeks, then over the next couple of days, make a real effort to look for it, because maybe things have changed. And also with Mercury moving direct, you yourself have been becoming sort of more decisive, or are about to become more decisive. There has been a lot of thinking, over the last few weeks, and longer than that. Ever since Mercury went into Leo. So Mercury went into Leo sort of the end of June. So that was quite a long time ago. It stays in Leo until I think September the 2nd. So it's a time where there is a lot of thought, and you're thinking about this possibility, and you're just not sure. In the last 3 weeks, you really have not been sure at all, and you've had real doubts, and a lot of questioning, and a lot of scenarios that you've been looking through, and perhaps speculative thinking, and there's just been hesitation all round. But now that Mercury is coming to a standstill, things are now moving. You can start to progress, move forward, and today, Monday, beginning of a new week, it's perhaps a time to really get going. And it's not just because Mercury is stationary direct, it's also because the moon is conjunct the North Node, and the moon is in Pisces, and it's making a trine to Venus and Jupiter, and that configuration, moon, North Node, trine Venus and Jupiter, could be of a practical value. may allow you to really think about what you want. You didn't really know what you wanted, or at least many Geminis didn't really know what they wanted over the last few weeks, but now it's becoming clear. You know that you have to push yourself more, and also take advantage of whatever is available. Remembering there is this conjunction between Venus and Jupiter today, tomorrow. It's a fortunate conjunction, and you might say that the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is strongest today rather than tomorrow, because today the Moon makes a trine to Venus and Jupiter, and even if the trine is not exact, you've got Moon in Pisces, a water sign, you've got Venus and Jupiter, also a water sign, and so money, work, career, ambition, it's all there for you. And you might be of a view that things are really difficult, but you're just remembering the past, because things over the last few weeks maybe were difficult. But those blockages, which might seem so permanent, they're not as bad as they look. And if you actually consider what is holding you back, there's not much there. And if you just give it the smallest amount of effort, Gemini, I really do think that you can get things moving. And it's possible, Gemini, that you have to do something to really symbolize that there has been a change. So what might you do? So it might be some action that you've been considering for weeks. It could be a visit. Perhaps you just want to talk to someone and you just put it off. Maybe you've been afraid, you thought it was the wrong time, maybe you just overanalyze the situation, but by making that move, by taking that initiative, by making yourself available, by putting in an appearance, that can really start something that is important. And yes, it can for sure work your way. So Gemini, the overall picture, looks good. And of course, with Venus-Jupiter conjunction, one very simple way to look at the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is to say, well, it's about other people. It could be about relationships. And so with Jupiter as a planet that does have a special connection with relationships in the Gemini horoscope, and so with Venus conjunct Jupiter at the beginning of this week, then you don't think that it's all about you. Give other people a chance. See what they can do, and perhaps you can be a recipient of someone else's generosity. Just someone being kind to you. People are favourably disposed, and so Gemini, don't be afraid to ask. Sure, you might be refused, but I think there's a better chance than average that you won't be refused. If it's something you want and you ask for something in good faith, I think that there's an excellent chance that you will get it. Cancer. It is a good day. I hope that it's a good day for everyone, but it's an especially good day for you. The moon is in pretty good shape. The moon is conjunct the North Node. It's in mutual reception to Jupiter. Moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs, and the moon is making trines to Venus and Jupiter. So don't hold back. If you want to do something or think something, imagine something, then you certainly can. And so you mustn't be constrained by the past. The past is always important, but it's not the only thing that matters. We do need progress, and Cancer, you can start thinking about progress. And in many cases, you can trust your feelings. Your feelings are pulling you in the right direction. Cancer, as a sign, has a reputation for being quite emotional, perhaps too emotional. sometimes you're sort of holding on to feelings and perhaps brooding. But if you have strong feelings today, it's probably best to just go with them, especially if those feelings are taking you in a positive direction. You feel enthusiastic about something. So, okay, a feeling can be negative, it can be hostile, it can be depressing. I'm not really talking about those feelings. I'm talking about the feelings which are uplifting, which are driving you towards something new. And so that is the right approach, I think. And if you feel that something should be done or something should be said, then you should probably go with it. And it's not a time to be over-analyzing the situation. You might sort of think, oh, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, and if I were to do that, and if I were to express myself here, well, this might go wrong, and who knows how another person is going to react. Well, yeah, if you go down that route, that's not very helpful. But if you just do what feels right, Cancer, then I don't think you're going to be sorry. And I mentioned that the moon is making a mutual reception to Jupiter. And Jupiter is, of course, in conjunction to Venus. Yeah, there is a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer. And it is exact. Okay, it might be exact tomorrow or today, beginning of this week. It's exact. It's there. And you could argue that the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is the most fortunate aspect there is. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics, and they're coming together. And it's in Cancer. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. And for you, it's in your sign. So that kind of puts me in a difficult position, because I want to be positive, but I don't want to be misleading. I don't want to give you false hope. And any astrologer doing a daily forecast for Cancer, if you look at your daily forecast for today, or certainly for tomorrow, but probably for today as well, if you look at your daily forecast for today, it's likely to be incredibly positive. Whatever astrologer you look at, if it's a daily horoscope, they're gonna be raving about Venus-Jupiter conjunction for Cancerians, and I'd like to rave, but at the same time, I am worried about creating false expectations, and that is a problem with astrology. I can tell you that everything is going to be wonderful, and the danger is that you can just sit around waiting for something wonderful to happen, and in that case, you might end up being very disappointed, and the Venus-Jupiter conjunction might end up being a negative, and that is not what we want. So how do you deal with Venus? How do you deal with this Venus-Jupiter conjunction? And remember, I'm talking about tomorrow, Tuesday, as well as today. How do you deal with it? You need to create as many chances for yourself as possible, and you should not be passive. You shouldn't just be sitting around waiting for something good to happen to you. You have to use your strengths. With Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer, that may well say something about how you can present yourself. And the way you present yourself does change from day to day, from week to week. And at the moment, you can present yourself in a way that is really fortunate and uplifting, and people are going to respond to it. And so it's all about thinking about what you want, what you would like to happen, and then perhaps creating a situation where it can happen. As I say, you can't win the lottery if you don't fill out the lottery ticket. I'm not telling you to do the lottery. It applies to anything. You have to create a possibility. And so, that means talking to people, asking for things. If you're unemployed, for example, well, you're not going to get a job unless you apply. And maybe making calls, not just about looking for jobs, or whatever you're looking for, whatever you'd like to happen. Although, I'm making an assumption that you're not entirely happy with your own life, that there's something you want to happen. Now, some Cancerians may be entirely happy with their life. They've got what they want. They don't have any worries as far as work, career, relationships. Well, in that case, you can just be. The Venus-Jupiter conjunction indeed does allow you to just be. And maybe we're wrong, or I'm wrong, to be thinking about the Venus-Jupiter conjunction in a material benefit gain kind of way. There is the spiritual dimension to it, and I'm often a bit sort of wary of talking about spirituality because it's a bit vague, and I can't be shown to be wrong if I talk about something vague and spiritual. But the moon is in Pisces. It is making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. Those are very spiritual aspects, and so perhaps Cancer, you can drift sort of beyond the material plane, especially today, because there aren't, especially on Monday and tomorrow as well, there aren't any planets in earth signs, and the earth signs could sort of weigh you down, and without any planets in earth signs, perhaps you have a chance to sort of reach sort of elevated levels, and you can experience new stuff and be aware that there are things you need to be doing, which they're not about the material world. They're not just about you benefiting in terms of dollars and cents, pounds and pennies, whatever. That's not what it's about. It's about you sort of elevating yourself and sort of moving beyond the current situation, and not being afraid to do that. Recently you might have been afraid to do it, but now things are much easier, and so perhaps Cancer is the time when you can really enjoy the moment and make the most of the moment, and just realize that you are part of something that is much larger than yourself, and there's no need to be afraid. Leo, you have some reservations at the moment. I mean, it is a good day. I mean, I'm telling everyone it's a good day, and I'm telling you it's a good day. But nonetheless, you have reservations. You're not entirely convinced about other people. They do, as far as you're concerned, they do seem to be holding something back. And you therefore should treat people with respect. You might think they could be giving you more, and you might push someone into offering more, or even just telling you more about themselves and who they are. And you might want to do that, but is it necessarily going to work? You have to be quite subtle when you deal with other people, and take into account whatever it is that is holding them back. And it's not a terrible situation. I mean, Mercury is going direct today, and Mercury is going direct in Leo. So you yourself can be more direct. You can be more sort of open. You can be more straightforward. But still, just because you're being open and honest, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get immediate results. And you do have to respect people's reservations, and also respect your own reservations. And today there is so much you want to hold back, and it's not just other people wanting to hold back. In fact, it could be a projection. You want to keep things to yourself, and because you want to keep things to yourself, you see that other people also want to keep things to themselves. So things might appear to be slightly stuck, even though Mercury is going stationary direct. But Mercury stationary direct, something has shifted. Your expectations have shifted. You want more, and soon enough you'll be able to sort of present yourself in a more effective way. But it's just, you may not feel Mercury going stationary direct today. That might be more about tomorrow, because tomorrow, well, Tuesday, the moon moves into Leo, and moon moving into Leo, that is going to make things much easier for you. So for the moment, Leo, don't be in a rush. Understand that things are still complicated, and we additionally there's that opposition aspect between Mars and Saturn. It's separating, but it's still in operation, and that Mars opposition Saturn might give further indications about other people and how they're responding to you, even people who are important to you. That there is some agitation there, and certain people might appear as if they are trying to hold you up, trying to hold you back. And again, this is a temporary situation, so it's very important that you don't reach conclusions today. You might think that that today is not a good start to the week. There is potential, there's promise. You're starting to think that there should be more out there, but you're not seeing the evidence. And the message is that you absolutely shouldn't panic, and tomorrow is going to be different. And as far as today is concerned, maybe you should just be thinking about what's going on in your own private world, because you're capable of deep thought, and you need to go beyond your own pessimism and to see the real possibilities. And you don't have to talk about them. You can just imagine them for the moment, and sort of later in the week, you'll have more of a chance to bring these ideas out into the open. And I do think that tomorrow, Tuesday, is likely to be a much better day than today, Monday. Virgo. Today, Mercury comes to a standstill. So Mercury has been retrograde for the last few weeks, and it now is stationary direct. Now, from a Virgo perspective, that should be good news. Mercury is your ruler. Over the last few weeks, Mercury hasn't always been in a particularly good position. It's been quite close to the Sun, so it's been combust at times. And Mercury's in Leo. I would argue that Mercury is not a sign where Leo works particularly well. It's not in detriment or fallen in Leo, but it's a sign where Mercury just can't manifest its full potential. That's because Leo is a fixed sign, and it's Mercury would appreciate more variability, and so that suggests some of the things you've been sort of experiencing over the last few weeks. Things just haven't been moving as quickly as you would like them to, and perhaps there are things that you've put on hold, or you felt you had no choice but to delay them. The time wasn't right, or you just didn't feel that you were in the right mood, or maybe you were just being too shy. There were things you wanted to say, but you didn't say it. You just didn't think the timing was right. But things are now changing. Mercury's position from now on is going to steadily improve. It goes direct. That's the first point to make. And additionally, if you track Mercury through, so Mercury went stationary at around 15 Leo on when was that? On the 18th, around the 18th of July, and so as Mercury moves forward, as it moves towards 18 Leo, you can start. In other words, it's returning to the position it was when it went retrograde. As it moves towards 18 Leo, so it gets to 18 Leo on I make it the 26th, 27th of August, between now and the next couple of weeks, between now and the end of August, you can really recover lost ground. And so, don't think that it's too late. Don't think that anything is spoilt, beyond recovery. That is not true. And so now you've got to get back into gear. And of course, September the 2nd, I think it's September the 2nd, Mercury changes sign and moves into Virgo. In other words, it moves into your sign. So what I'm saying is that from now on, things are steadily going to improve. And applied to you, we might say the same thing, that things are getting back on the rails. And so, don't be negative about it, and just don't feel powerless. Today you might feel that there's nothing you can do. There's no point, and it's like you haven't realized that something has changed, and something definitely has changed. But for the moment, you might just think, like today, what is the point? You could see an action, you could see something that could be done, but you just don't want to do it. Should you do it? You could. That might not be such a bad thing, provided you don't have to, provided you don't take it too quickly. So don't hold back, and just consider that what's happened was just a temporary hiccup. Maybe it was something that was absolutely necessary. You were moving forward, things were moving at a certain pace, and you'd perhaps gone too far, and you had to reconsider your plans. But that process of reconsideration is now over. And as far as today is concerned, the moon is in Pisces, and it's conjunct the North Node in Pisces. The moon is actually making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. And so there are things going on today which do look good. And don't underestimate the role that other people can have in your life. You don't have to do everything on your own. You don't have to assume that if you can't do it, well, there's no point in trying. See what other people have to say. Give other people a chance. And if you don't feel especially lucky yourself, maybe you can pick up on other people's luck. I mean, after all, the moon is not just making a conjunction of the North Node. The moon is making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. And that trine may say something about your interpersonal and your social life. So if you try to be sociable, if you try to, find out what's going on in other people's lives, you don't want to be nosy, of course. You don't want to intrude. But if you just try to engage, and you see who is available, who wants to talk, then that will really help things move. And if you start to think about what's going on in other people's lives, then you stop worrying so much about your own life and your own fortune or lack of fortune. And so you stop thinking about yourself for a couple of moments. And then when you do start thinking about yourself again, if not today, then tomorrow, then you realize that something has changed. And of course something has changed, because Mercury is now direct and things are moving. And when movement happens, it takes place at different levels. The first movement is not visible. It happens at quite a sort of a deep, private level, and that's you. The wheels are slowly starting to move, and no one else can notice it. Maybe even you can't notice it to begin with. But things are happening. Things may have seized up for a bit, but now, yes, the wheels are moving, and soon enough, they'll start to sort of gather speed, and by the end of the month and into September, you really will be on great form. So it could be a slow process to begin with, about sort of getting back to normal, but it's happening. I mean, don't worry, Virgo. It really is. It is happening. Libra. Venus is conjunct Jupiter, an aspect that I have been talking about rather a lot, and I regard this aspect as, being really good. It's good for everyone, but it's good for you in particular because Venus is your ruler, and so if Venus is conjunct Jupiter, then that does make you fortunate. It gives you a real boost, and so what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to do nothing? Well, if you do nothing, then I'm afraid that would be a shame. I mean, it's always possible that good luck will appear out of nowhere, but that's not the way it usually works. And it's just so easy to just, particularly if you know a bit about astrology, to think about an aspect like that and to think, oh, it's all going to be great. But no, you've got to do some work. With Jupiter aspects, they demand work. In a way, more than Saturn aspects, because if you don't do anything to bring them down to Earth, then what can you expect to happen? Particularly now, there's nothing in Earth. There are no planets in Earth signs unless you count the South Node, and so ask yourself, Libra, what would you like to happen today and tomorrow? I mean, okay, this Venus-Jupiter conjunction is going to be exact tomorrow, Tuesday, unless you're in California and very late this evening. It's going to be exact. So plan it, work it out, and if there's something specific that you want to achieve, don't just assume that it's just going to happen, that it will just suddenly work. You've got to work at it, without coming over as being pushy. You've got to be quite natural about it, but you've got to really create the opportunities. And I'm telling this to a lot of the signs. It's not just you, but this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, probably of all the signs, maybe Cancer because it's in Cancer, but I think for you as well, because Cancer is a sign that is connected with success in a Libra chart. So where can success manifest? Where can it put down roots? And so Libra, that really does mean that you have to make it happen. And as far as where, well, if you have a job, you can do the job very well, and by doing a job well, it can improve your position. And if you have a business, now would be the time to really be presenting yourself, telling everyone what you can do, looking for new work with Venus-Jupiter conjunction. The same applies if you're unemployed or looking for a new job. You might think, well, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the summer, there's no point in trying, no point in asking, you won't get a reply. No, don't think like that. Was it the Sex Pistols? They had a song like that, No Future. Whoever is, there's no point in asking because you won't get a reply. No, it's not like that. It's certainly worth asking, because if you don't ask, then what's going to happen? And so you've got to really push this Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Now, you might think that you're being clumsy, you're getting in people's way, that if you make some effort to get in contact, that will not be appreciated. Well, that might be true sometimes, but Venus is conjunct Jupiter, and Venus-Jupiter, is a conjunction that, really appreciates it when you make an effort. Again, you don't have to be pushy about it. You can just ask. The worst that can happen is that you'll be refused. But at the same time, there's something about the way you present yourself. You can present yourself extremely well. Venus is you. Venus is conjunct Jupiter. You can be a larger-than-life, optimistic person who, gives people the opportunity to make things better for themselves. And so it's not just about you benefiting, it's about everyone benefiting. So, do make the most of this conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. And it's not just about money or material success. Venus-Jupiter is it's about the way you feel. And with Venus conjunct Jupiter, that Jupiter just gives you a broader view, allows you to come over in a positive way, positive as far as you're concerned. So if you have positive thoughts, they will start to reinforce each other. And then, if you can be positive in other people's company, if you can really boost people, maybe tell them how wonderful they are. You don't have to go for mindless flattery, though. And it may just be something about your overall presence, and it's not just about your luck, it's about other people's luck, and you can be a lucky person to have around. And I think that's going to be obvious. Though, today may be a bit different from tomorrow. I mean, today the moon is in Pisces, tomorrow the moon is in Aries, but today the moon is in Pisces is making a trine to Venus and Jupiter, and that might be telling you something about what you need to do to make the most of Venus and Jupiter. And this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, it's not in a fire sign. It doesn't have the sparking inspiration of, say, being in Aries or Sagittarius. It's in Cancer, which is a sort of more down-to-earth sign in a way. And so with moon in Pisces trine Venus and Jupiter, there is a reminder there that if you want to take advantage of this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, you do have to do the work, you have to do the preparation. That is the right thing to do. You have to do the groundwork. You have to create a space for good luck to come your way, and just create that space. And that work may be very physical, literally creating a physical space, but it could be just a space in terms of you and clearing out stuff from the past, expectations from the past, and creating sort of an open canvas on which any possibility can be drawn, written, however it is. So make that possibility open by creating some emptiness, and perhaps there's a certain zen to it. So if you clear your space and everything is somewhat stark. Why stark? Because if you've got an empty room, then you're creating the possibilities for new stuff to come in. If the room, on the other hand, is just full of boxes and furniture, what new can come into your life? Well, nothing. And so maybe a question of sort of as above, so below. You create your space here, and then above there's a higher energies. They see there's a space, and they provide you with the good fortune that you're looking for. But again, you've got to put in the work in order to get that good fortune. Scorpio. Mars is still opposition Saturn. I mean, it's not exact, but still there. And so that Mars opposition Saturn can represent moments of frustration, and it's also, Mars is still opposition Neptune. So these aspects have not gone away, but they're starting to lose their strength. So today there could be moments of confusion and even sort of frustration, and you shouldn't let it get to you. I mean, maybe you're seeing it for the first time because Monday, it's just the beginning of a week. You're having to perhaps interact with the sort of everyday world, and you're seeing how that Mars opposition Saturn, Mars opposition Neptune is really manifesting. And to begin with, it might not be easy, but don't get too frustrated, and try to understand that in other departments things have changed. For example, one change that we're getting today is Mercury is now stationary direct, and Mercury's in Leo. Leo is an important sign in the Scorpio chart. It's a fixed sign. It's right at the top of your chart. And so with Mercury going stationary direct, there's something about your ideas, and some of your ideas, particularly about your broad direction in life, have been confused. They've been sort of going all over the place, and you haven't been sure, and you wanted to do one thing, then you had your doubts, and then you thought about something else and you had more doubts. But now Mercury's direct, there is clarity. And that's what Scorpios want, clarity, just knowing that everything is in order, everything is straightforward. You know what you want, and you're very sure about what you want. And so that might be something that is going on today, or it's a process that is starting today. It doesn't necessarily, have to all be about today and what is happening today. That's not the only thing it's about. But things are changing, and things are changing for the better. And at the same time, the moon is in Pisces. It's in a water sign. Pisces is a sign which is friendly to Scorpio, and the moon is making trines to Venus and Jupiter, and those trines between Venus and Jupiter allow you to get some distance, get some distance from perhaps some of the problems from the past, perhaps from that Mars making an opposition to Saturn, opposition to Neptune. Don't get too focused on what has happened in the past. Scorpios can brood, and you can be thinking about the frustrations of the past, and that might be what Mars opposition Saturn and Mars opposition Neptune are about. Things that you're trying to move on from, but it's not always easy. But the moon making a trine to Venus and Jupiter does allow you to move on. It does allow you to see things from a different view, and to realize that a lot of it is down to you. You are in control, and if there's anything that is important to you, then there's absolutely no reason why you can't go ahead and do it and enjoy it. And once you do something that you are enjoying in a really sort of deep and profound way, then everything comes together, because the moon is making a conjunction, making a trine to Venus and Jupiter, and this Venus Jupiter conjunction says something not just about you, but it says something about other people and the kind of stance other people have. You shouldn't think that other people are static. Well, unless you're dealing with some very static people who refuse to change. That would be unfortunate and unnecessary, because with this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, there are people out there who have a way of looking at the world which is perhaps very different from your own, but it could be quite enlightening. And, if possible, you should be gravitating towards, people who are sort of open-minded and perhaps have quite a spiritual view, and they can see beyond the minutiae of sort of material existence. And so try to gravitate towards those kinds of people who are going to support you and complement what you're doing. It's certainly not a day for doing things another person's way. You should avoid people who have very strict opinions, who just feel there's only one way of doing it. People who are judgmental, people who are overly judgmental. You should avoid that kind of person. You should be looking for variety and inspiration in other people. That's what you should expect, and you're absolutely right to expect all of that. And don't forget your own inspiration, because right now the Scorpio mind is sparkling with life. There's lots of things going on in your mind. Your mind is going all over the place, and it's happening at the same time as Mercury is going stationary direct. So if you suddenly have an idea, or perhaps ideas that have been building up over the recent past, and it all comes together, and you think, oh, that's it, that's what you want to do, then that might be a very important realization. So don't give up on it. Don't think it's impossible. If you feel that something really does matter, can be realized in the real world, then hold on to that feeling and allow your inspirations free rein. But it's not just lots of inspirations. It's just perhaps boils down to one or two inspirations. It may all just come together for you, Scorpio, and it might not be at a time of your choosing. It just happens, and you realize what is the case, and you realize what you have to do. And so that all looks good, and I think if you make the most of the day's energies, it can be a successful and inspiring day. Sagittarius. I'm quite optimistic about today. Things are starting to happen, and they will continue to happen tomorrow. So you could say that Monday is today's part one, Tuesday is sort of part two. So it's a sort of two stages there. And so as far as today is concerned, well, there's still some thought, some contemplation. You're not entirely ready to do everything, but you can see the possibilities, and the possibilities are becoming increasingly clear. And to begin with, it may be enough to just work them out, on your own, or with people you really trust. The moon is in Pisces, it's conjunct the North Node. That does indicate that today there's nothing that you necessarily have to do. There's nowhere that you have to go, and you can start to feel just a growing sense of satisfaction, and not just satisfaction, just an awareness that you are on the right tracks, that you have sorted things out, that things are becoming clear, and matters are improved by the fact that the moon in Pisces is making sextiles to Venus and Jupiter. Now, that moon-Jupiter sextile is important because, moon and Jupiter, sextile, trine. The moon is making trines to Venus, a trine to Venus, trine to Jupiter. And so the moon and Jupiter are currently in mutual reception. So that strengthens Jupiter. The moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs, and they're in trine aspect, and Jupiter is in its exaltation, and Jupiter is on the fixed star Sirius, which overall is a pretty fortunate influence. And so that means that you can be content, you can be satisfied, but you don't have to be complacent. That in the end something has to shift, something has to move. But today is perhaps about working out what you're going to do, having a vision for the future, working on it, but not feeling that you have to be overly pressurized. Now, tomorrow things do change. The moon moves into Aries, and Aries is a fire sign, and that has a sort of a special relationship to Sagittarius. But we don't have to worry about the moon in Aries right now. Moon in Aries might be a call for action, but as far as today is concerned, you can be quite satisfied with the way things are. If you do have to do something, if you feel that it really is important, then you can certainly do it. It's not like you're constrained. You have a lot of freedom today, but unless it's a matter of some urgency, Sagittarius, I don't think much needs to happen externally. But I think there is a lot going on in terms of your own mind and your own ideas, and you're going to be helped by the fact that Mercury is going stationary direct. So Mercury's been going retrograde over the last 3 weeks, and that might have created a few problems. You had ideas, you had plans, and somehow you weren't able to get it together, and you were trying to make connections, but the connections just didn't work out. And now that Mercury is moving direct, things can start to move again. And one way in which they might move may represent your ambitions. You had ambitions, but you have ambitions, but they're not always working your way. They might be stuck, or they might have felt stuck in the past, or perhaps you just had to go over them again, which is absolutely reasonable. It's okay to rework things and to just ask yourself, was something reasonable? Were you adopting the right approach? And you can ask yourself that kind of question. That's really not a problem. And Mercury also is ruler of Gemini, and Gemini is your opposite sign. And so, as Mercury is going stationary, you may find that some people are becoming more definite. They weren't sure. They weren't ready to commit. They weren't telling you what was on their mind. They were keeping it to themselves. But now with Mercury going direct, there is movement. And if you have felt that one reason for any stagnation was other people's attitude, well, there's a change there, because other people are going to be more decisive, and that's going to make things easier for you. And so, overall, Sagittarius, it looks like being a time where, things are moving, the ice is melting, and you don't necessarily have to do anything. You can if you want, but you don't necessarily have to. But you can start preparing for your next move. And tomorrow, Tuesday, is likely to be more active than today. Capricorn. Mars is still opposition Saturn, and that aspect is past exactitude. But with Mars opposition Saturn still, there may be moments of frustration, even a bit of anger. Nothing is entirely moving. You'd like it to move, but it's not. And you're not overly worried about the situation. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll see that things are improving. Things are sort of getting back to normal, but it's a slow process, and you're also getting used to a new reality. With Mars now moving through Libra, and Mars in Libra, you might think, oh well, Mars is in its detriment. Libra isn't the best sign for Mars, but look at it from a Capricorn perspective. From a Capricorn perspective, Libra is a sign where Saturn is exalted, so you do have a sympathy with Mars, and Mars is an assertive energy in Libra, and it is a time. I think Mars stays in Libra until September the 22nd, isn't that right, or something like that? And so while Mars is moving through Libra, you can be more definite, more direct, and you can be more ambitious. Perhaps in the past you've been working out what you want, what you don't want, and now it's becoming clear. And perhaps the Mars opposition Saturn is reinforcing that clarity. And so Capricorn, you can now think about the future. You've perhaps had a small crisis where you did feel stuck, but now you're starting to be aware of what needs to be done and what can be done. So in a slightly grim way, it's all rather positive. Capricorns always have a negative and realistic streak. That's true. That's perhaps where the grimness lies. But now it's time to sort of get going on it. And if you felt that something was holding you back, Capricorn, then it's gone. It's moving. It's moving into the past. So it is a time when you really can, start to assert yourself. So at the same time as all of this, Venus is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, I regard it as being something that is entirely fortunate. It's a great aspect, and this conjunction between Venus-Jupiter is taking place in Cancer, which is your opposite sign. So one interpretation of the Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer would be something to do with relationships. It might represent a person who is larger than life. Perhaps in the first instance you might regard them as being too larger than life, too over the top, not the kind of person that you really want to deal with at the moment, because it's just all too much. But you are being challenged here. You are being encouraged to take things further. So if you see that other people are very alive, perhaps annoyingly alive. Don't run away. Perhaps you're being encouraged to do something, and perhaps it's something to do with your shadow. We look at it from a Jungian view, but the Venus-Jupiter conjunction say that everything that you reject about yourself, but of course, which is really in actual fact completely yourself, is coming alive, and you perhaps see that in other people. If other people are larger than life, it's telling you that you need to be larger than life, and you're rejecting that. And so perhaps the challenge is to take things to a new level, and it's not something you want to do. But maybe I'm just being too psychological about it, and just this Venus-Jupiter conjunction can just be about other people's response, how other people are behaving. It may say something about relationships, how partners are behaving, new people in your life are behaving. At first, it just might seem too much, but give people a chance, especially as the moon is making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. And so this might be a time to be talking to people that you wouldn't normally talk to, and you might think it's not something you want to do, not something you might want to waste your time on, but I really do think that it's worth the effort. And so if you haven't talked to someone for weeks, months, years, maybe now is the time to open up, to be communicative, and tell them what's on your mind, and let them tell you what's on their mind, and let people be themselves. And if you allow people to be themselves, you're going to learn a great deal. It's not just about learning, it's about experiencing as well. So do let people have an influence on you. That doesn't mean that you're going to be losing control. It means that you're just making yourself open to new possibilities. Aquarius. Right now, Aquarius, there may be things of a material nature that you might be thinking about. You might think that they're important. You don't really want to think that they're important, because you might be of a view that you've got better things to do. But it's worth your while spending a bit of time thinking about money and things and possessions, because something might come your way, because the moon in Pisces is making a trine to Venus and Jupiter, and it's a fortunate aspect. It's not necessarily a dramatic aspect, but it's something you just do, even if you don't want to do it. Just might be worth the while. It could be something administrative. Maybe you've been negative about something financial. Maybe there's something you need to apply for. Maybe you thought you might have been entitled to some money, then you found out you weren't, and you've perhaps regarded that as a done deal. You can't get it. Tough. But try again. Keep trying. Be enthusiastic. If someone has rejected you, especially if if an organization has rejected you in a financial way, could be an insurance claim, for example, then it might be a good idea to just write another letter. Or if there's an appeal procedure, just perhaps go through with the appeal procedure. You might think it's a waste of time, but you never know. So give yourself the chance here, and that may be one way in which the Venus-Jupiter, the moon trine Venus-Jupiter is working. Give yourself that chance. If it requires a bit of work, yeah, it might require some work, but who knows? Just a piece of work that takes you half an hour might be worth hundreds, thousands of dollars. I mean, I'm not trying to create unreal expectations here. I'm just trying to see how things are astrologically, and just see if you can really start to sort of really make the most of it. And in general, effort is going to be rewarded today. Whatever the effort is, and I'm not just talking about money or making applications. Whatever you want to put the effort in, or maybe you don't want to put the effort in, but if you put in the effort, you will get something back. I'm fairly confident about it, and yeah, it may not be the thing you want to do, and you might have a negative view. I mean, don't forget Mars is still opposition Saturn, so Mars opposition Saturn, this aspect can be quite frustrating, and you might assume that it's just not worth the effort, but it is always worth the effort. And you keep trying, you keep pushing, and in the end, you can break through. And so I think it's very important that you have a positive outlook, and that's what you dwell on. If you dwell on the negatives, if you dwell on the past, that's not the right approach. You don't want to create self-fulfilling prophecies. You believe it's not going to work, so it's not going to work, so there's no point in trying, and so you're vindicated, supposedly. Try to be positive, and that's use that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. But yeah, it may be more effort than you'd like. And at the same time, we have got Mercury going stationary direct, and Mercury going stationary direct might say something about relationships. Mercury is in Leo, your opposite sign, and so with Mercury going stationary direct, that could be about relationships. Mercury is going stationary direct opposition Pluto. And I mean, Mercury still is quite a long way from the opposition of Pluto, 2 degrees, over 2 degrees. But the thing is, it is direct, so that does kind of bring up Mercury-Pluto opposition into focus one last time. And so it could be that someone is having a change of mind. Someone important to you is having a change of mind. You thought they'd gone away. You thought perhaps that they weren't interested in something. Then you discover they were interested in it all along. So don't assume over the last few weeks that someone has changed, that someone has given up on something. They haven't. And with Mercury going direct, you may see another person, perhaps an important person in your life, showing new intensity. And I don't think that is anything to worry about. In fact, it could be quite interesting. Pisces. There's no reason, Pisces, why it shouldn't be a great day. I mean, the moon is in your sign. It's conjunct the North Node. It's in mutual reception to Jupiter. The moon is making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter rules Pisces. And Venus is conjunct Jupiter. So Venus has a relationship to Pisces because Venus is exalted in Pisces. So this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, which is exact today and tomorrow, Tuesday, is really strong at the moment. And it is a fortunate aspect. It could be argued that of all of the aspects, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is the best, at least on paper. But the problem with Venus-Jupiter, with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, is that it can be taken for granted. You just assume that it's going to come up with the goods. There's nothing you have to do. You just hang around waiting for something great to happen. Well, if you take that approach, well, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. So with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, as I'm telling a lot of people, you've got to work on it. You've got to make it happen. You've got to, see what is available. Be pushy. Don't be afraid of being pushy at the moment, because this approach will be absolutely right. The moon is making a conjunction of the North Node, and so how you present yourself. You know how to present yourself. You need to present yourself in quite a dynamic way. You're putting yourself first. It's okay to put yourself first. You're not being selfish. It is expected of you, or rather, the universe expects it of you, and. Venus conjunct Jupiter, is everything that you want, and you can get everything you want through your own efforts, or you can start processes going, by writing letters, sending emails, making phone calls. You can start processes going, which have a fortunate outcome. And, Venus is conjunct Jupiter. Venus is a universal significator of relationships. So with that Venus conjunct Jupiter, you can benefit from other people. Other people are there for you. You can be there for them as well. But this Venus conjunct Jupiter, from a relationship perspective, well, the classic view of Venus conjunct Jupiter in Cancer in the Pisces horoscope would be to say how wonderful it was from a relationship and romantic perspective. Your average star sign astrologer who puts out daily columns will be positive about it when it comes to relationships, and we'll talk about all the wonderful things that can happen. I mean, we don't want to exaggerate, and certainly we don't want to create unreal expectations. But if you're in a relationship, then there's a real chance that things can work. Okay, you've got to make a bit of an effort, but not too much of an effort. The moon is trine Venus and Jupiter. That's an easy aspect. It's not dynamic. And so if you put in the effort, if you make it clear what you want, and you show a bit of generosity and enthusiasm, that just might be all it takes. And Venus and Jupiter it's not just about relationships. It's about your ambitions, what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it, and it's all about how you do it. What is your individual path? We all have our individual paths. It's not just about doing what's expected of us. And with this Venus Jupiter conjunction, you have the possibility of succeeding on your own terms. And succeeding on your own terms means doing something that you're happy about it. You feel satisfied. You feel very real about what you're doing. So Pisces, no need to say anything more. If you go about things the right way, I think it looks like being a great Monday. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. I'm sorry I was rather too positive in some places, but this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, it's a great aspect, and it does feed through. It will feed through into Tuesday, and so now it's time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question: what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 14, which is possession in great measure. And you could say that this is a very appropriate hexagram to get at a time when we have the Venus making a conjunction to Jupiter. Very fortunate aspect, Venus conjunct Jupiter. And additionally, we've got the moon in Pisces making a trine to Venus and Jupiter. Now, possession in great measure has no moving lines. It doesn't move anywhere. So it's locked. And so that just says something about the general vibe of today. It's good, and we have to think about what does it mean, possession in great measure. Now, you could interpret it as saying things are going to come your way. There are things you want to possess, so you're going to get hold of them. Maybe money's going to come your way, or whatever else you're looking for, whatever else it is that you want to possess. So that is one approach. But it is a locked hexagram. It's not moving anywhere. It stays where it is. And perhaps you have to think not just about future possessions, the things you would like to possess, but also the things you already possess. And it's easy to underestimate what we possess and to think that we should be having more, whatever our financial position. I understand that people watching this will have all sorts of different circumstances, and some people might not feel that they possess very much, that they might feel they need to possess more. But the first thing you need to do is to look at what you already possess. And it's telling you that in terms of your current situation and what you are currently trying to do, you have enough. You have enough to do it. And I know that that might not sound great if you haven't got any money and you feel that there is financial pressure, and to think that you have enough when you really think you don't have enough. But it's not just about money. It's also about what your talents are, what your experience is, everything you have in your head. Everything that you've developed over your life, you have developed a huge amount, and you should not assume that that's nothing, it's meaningless. It's not meaningless at all. And so, just think about what you're trying to do. Even if it seems difficult, even if you feel you don't have the resources, you do have the resources, because that's what possession in great measure is about. Now, there are no moving lines, so that might mean that it's down to you to do the work. That's what I've been saying a lot for example, in my forecasts of the 12 signs, because we've got this Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Venus-Jupiter conjunctions can often just not work because people don't work. People don't put in the effort, and just Venus-Jupiter just passes them by, and that's not what we want to happen. And so, because there are no moving lines, that is demanding that you push it, that you push things further, and you really make the most of everything you've got. So you could then say that this hexagram, possession in great measure, says a great deal about choice. That we certainly have choices. We can decide how much we want to escalate things, how we are going to bring to bear all our sort of many talents and abilities and experiences, because we can. And okay, so again, I understand that might not seem very useful if things at the moment seem quite difficult for you. But I'm just telling you that it is there. This is what the hexagram is all about. This, you're looking at it through choice. You made a decision to watch me do my forecasts of the 12, my forecasts of the I Ching. So you are part of this forecast. So it's telling you something about what you need to do. And you do need to sort of make the most of your resources, because you should not sort of underestimate them. Now, we don't have a moving line, any moving lines. We do have a nuclear hexagram, and we can see the nuclear hexagram, because if we knock off the top line and the bottom line, we just see we've got 3 unbroken lines, and then we've got the 5th line from the bottom is broken. And so that means that the nuclear hexagram, sort of underlying the whole situation, is hexagram number 43, which is breakthrough. And this hexagram breakthrough is not necessarily as fortunate as it seems. Now, I should make it clear, this is not the I Ching reading. This is not what your day is going to be like. It's more about the background for what your day is about. And breakthrough is about a situation which is serious, and things quite potentially have gone badly wrong, and something is happening, is in the process of happening, and you need to get out. And it could be about escape. But the overall situation has just got out of hand, and you're dealing with something where you're on the brink of disaster, but you are able to escape. You might perceive this as but if you look at the two hexagrams, the top 3 lines, the top trigram represents the lake, and the bottom 3 trigrams, they're sort of heavenly. Those 3 trigrams are very, very creative. It's about a very active thing. So there's a lot of action there, but the lake is on top of things. And where is the lake going? Gravity could take the lake down, and so if you've got the lake coming down, well, what do you get? You get a flood, don't you? And so. A breakthrough, also means that the enemy is abroad. The enemy is everywhere. The I Ching talks about, watch out. You can hear the cries of the prisoners. Other people are being captured. You want to escape being captured, so you have to run. So that's, if you like, the background to this hexagram, to possession in great measure. So it could be that, all of us are aware that maybe the enemy is at the gates. I mean, not the literal enemy. I'm not saying you're under siege, and you need everything you've got to make the most of things. And I would see this, the previous hexagram breakthrough, as perhaps a bit about being societal, saying about what's happening around us. That to an extent we all have to look after ourselves. That's not about being selfish, but we do have to look after our own interests, and we can't be complacent, and sometimes we just have to take action. And the question is, do we have what it takes to take action? And the answer is, for sure, is yes, possession in great measure, because we have what it takes to survive and also to prosper, because we mustn't underestimate ourselves. We've got wisdom, intellectual resources, and we have what it takes, and we can use our possessions to really get through the situation and to make the most of the situation, and to prosper. Now, there is also, as I've said at the beginning of this hexagram, it may be that there's an opportunity to increase one's possessions on a material level. That is possible. So if you see an opportunity to make money, get something else, something you want, maybe even a job, whatever it is you want, immediately make the most of it. And of course, this ties in with the fact that Venus is conjunct Jupiter, and Venus-Jupiter conjunction can be about getting stuff, but not just assuming that it will just work for you as like some act of magic. That's not how it's likely to work. It's going to happen, through your own efforts. So, overall, I do think that this hexagram for today is really very positive. And now I want to look at two things. I want to look at the fact that Mercury is going stationary direct, and the fact that Venus is conjunct Jupiter. And I'll start with Mercury going stationary direct. I don't want to say a huge amount about it. So here is the chart for Mercury going stationary direct. This is the precise moment that Mercury stations. And so with Mercury station, the way you perhaps could see Mercury stations is you see that, Mercury went retrograde in July. It went retrograde, July the 13th, and approximately, and it went retrograde. That was Saturn. Mercury went retrograde on July the 18th. At around 1534 Leo, and so went retrograde at 1534 Leo, and it went backwards until today, August the 11th, and it went backwards as far as 4 degrees 15 Leo, and now it starts to go, it's stationary, and then it goes forward, and then Mercury keeps going on until it returns to 1534 Leo on around August the 25th. So August the 25th is when the whole Mercury cycle, retrograde cycle, is over, when Mercury returns to where it was when it originally went retrograde on July the 18th. And that can be a moment when things finally come together, when we're finally back to where we were, when everything is resolved and we can start genuinely entering new ground. And of course, I think it's around September the 2nd, Mercury changes sign, moves into Virgo, moves into its own sign. So Mercury gets strengthened, of course, by moving into Virgo. And So looking at Mercury's station at the moment, Mercury station's opposition Pluto. Now that Mercury-Pluto opposition is something from the past, but because Mercury is absolutely stationary, I think there is a Mercury-Pluto feel to it. Mercury-Pluto can be intense thoughts. It can be about not wanting to say things because we're afraid of what might happen. But perhaps we shouldn't worry too much about it. I mean, the thing about Mercury retrograde and Mercury going stationary direct is that things are returning to normal. And there have been communication breakdowns, and things maybe have got lost. Lost things can perhaps be found, and people are able to talk to each other again. And Mercury going direct. I mean, it's kind of interesting that Trump and Putin have scheduled this meeting for last I heard, it's on Friday in Alaska. So I'm sure an astrologer wasn't working for them, but it's good that they're having a meeting if they want to have a productive meeting while Mercury is direct. And so the plans for the meeting, with Mercury going direct, that should help, all things being equal. I will try to look at this meeting in greater detail in a few days' time when we have a precise time and when we have I'm not quite sure where in Alaska at the moment it's happening. And so that's one feature of Mercury going stationary direct. But it is something positive, and things are moving, and Mercury has been in a rather difficult position, but its condition now is going to be steadily improving. And one thing I noticed, and this is completely irrelevant, it's just some link that I noticed that I just thought I'd point out as I was looking at the chart recently. I was looking at the horoscope of when plutonium was isolated. Plutonium was isolated on December the 14th, 1940 at 8 p.m. in Berkeley, California. And at the time of the isolation, if 8 p.m. is the correct time, I think 8 p.m. is around the right time, that would suggest that you had an ascendant of 4 degrees 40 Leo, and you had Pluto at 4 degrees 0 Leo. So you had ascendant of 4 degrees 40 Leo, Pluto at 4 degrees 0 Leo, and Mercury is going stationary. Mercury goes stationary direct, very close to the position of Pluto at the time of Pluto's isolation, and also, at the time of plutonium's isolation in 1940, and also close to the ascendant. So I know what that means. Maybe there'll be talk about plutonium. Maybe something about plutonium maybe links with Mercury going stationary direct. I mean, it's a long shot. I'm sure there won't be any mention of plutonium, but I just noticed that connection. You can read that however you like it. But I look at so many charts that inevitably I'm going to find connections, and they seem really interesting and significant. But maybe there's just nothing going on there. So let me now turn to the conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. I was going to talk about Venus-Jupiter tomorrow, Tuesday, but tomorrow there's a Saturn-Uranus sextile, and I think I wanted to talk about that Saturn-Uranus sextile because that might be something important, something that certainly I need to think about. And also we want to talk about Venus and Jupiter before it becomes exact, so perhaps we have time to prepare ourselves for it. So here is the chart for the exact moment of Venus and Jupiter, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So, this Venus-Jupiter conjunction is at 14 degrees 4 Cancer. And so I've already said this Venus-Jupiter conjunction is on Sirius. So it's on the dog star, a fortunate influence. So I think that, we can perhaps get excited about this Venus-Jupiter conjunction. It is logically the best aspect in the book. It is entirely fortunate, especially as Jupiter is in its exaltation. So I think that on an individual level, it can be a time when many of us can be very successful. Unfortunately, this Venus-Jupiter conjunction can be, for many of us, we may experience it as disappointment. And the reason we might experience it as disappointment is that Venus and Jupiter might create a lot of expectations. And for one reason or another, we don't do what we have to do. It's all very well having expectations, but what are we doing about it? If we do nothing, then then nothing happens. That might happen, and it's possible that Venus-Jupiter conjunction just allows good luck to just fall on your head from nowhere. But in most cases, I think that is unlikely. So the challenge here, if we don't want to be disappointed by the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, is to really use it. To make the most of it. When you think about Venus-Jupiter, you think about good luck, money, relationships. All of that is apparently available, and we just have to be careful of hyperbole and creating false expectations. I'd love to just wax lyrical about how great it's going to be, and all of us are going to have wonderful days, but it is about potential, and it's quite a short-lived aspect. Venus is moving quite quickly, so Venus will make the conjunction, then in a few days' time it will be gone. And so I really must emphasize that we mustn't take this Venus-Jupiter conjunction for granted. Now, I was kind of thinking, what specifically is this Venus-Jupiter conjunction about? And I then sort of did some midpoints for it. So if we look at this Venus-Jupiter conjunction on the 90-degree dial, there it is. So Venus and Jupiter, there's Venus and Jupiter, there's the conjunction, and so let's put the dial on Venus and Jupiter, and so by looking at those midpoints, we get an understanding perhaps of how that Venus-Jupiter is going to work. And this is for Jupiter. So the midpoint tree for Jupiter, now Jupiter is on the Venus Hades and Mars Zeus midpoints, and I suspect those are the two relevant midpoints to consider. So if we look at what Venus is on, so Venus is on, like Jupiter, is on the Mars Zeus midpoint. It's on the Venus Hades midpoint. So we got Jupiter Hades. So we got Venus Hades. But so Venus is on the Jupiter Hades midpoint and the Mars Zeus midpoint. Jupiter is on the Venus Hades midpoint and the Mars Zeus midpoint. So the Mars Zeus midpoint, what is Mars and Zeus about? Mars and Zeus, Zeus is can be about the military, can be about gunshots, explosions, can be about war. It's quite a warlike thing, Mars Jupiter, and so you could say that the Venus and Jupiter on the Mars Hades midpoint could be success in war, things happening on the battlefield that people, one side being very successful and another side perhaps losing, or sudden explosive violent success. And Venus, as I've said on numerous occasions, I regard Venus as potentially being a planet of war, and Venus is I kind of associate it with Nike, perhaps, the Greek goddess of victory. Of course, the Roman equivalent of Nike is Victoria. And so Venus is about victory. And on the Mars Hades midpoint, it could be about, Mars Zeus midpoint, it could be about a sudden victory, a sudden success in a war, in a battle. wherever that battle might be. I mean, one thinks of Gaza, one thinks of Ukraine. We've in a run up to these negotiations, Russia is, for example, on the point of, well, I don't know, but it always takes longer than expected, but is very close to taking a lot of crucial cities in Ukraine, like Pokrovsk and Kupiansk and some other places, and so overall the situation on the battlefield is looking pretty good for Russia. And there is a view that one reason why Trump has been in such a hurry to have this meeting is in response to the military situation. So that could be how this Venus-Jupiter conjunction, working on the Venus-Jupiter conjunction on the Mars-Zeus midpoint, that may say something about it. And additionally, Venus is on the Jupiter-Hades midpoint, and Jupiter is on the Venus-Hades midpoint. So you've got these lucky planets mixed up with Hades. And so Hades is, of course, quite an unfortunate, difficult planet, and can be to do with death and unpleasantness. And the overall interpretation I would see there would be... I mean, you look at Hades. I mean, let's actually see where Hades is precisely. I mean, let's just go to that Venus-Jupiter conjunction and just put in the hypotheticals. So you see, there is Hades. So Hades is at 15 degrees, at 15 degrees 5 Cancer. Venus and Jupiter are both moving towards a conjunction of Hades. So you've got these fortunate planets moving to Hades. And so you could interpret that as saying this is about benefiting from another person's misfortune. And that might be a big feature of this Venus-Jupiter conjunction. That might not sound very nice. But I don't think that the Hades influence can be discounted. I mean, Venus and Jupiter are just over 1 degree 1 minute from Hades, so it's close enough. Particularly as Venus and Jupiter are both now applying to Hades, and so the Jupiter Hades conjunction will take place, in the next. By the when's it going to happen? Over the next week, Venus will get there quicker. So benefiting from other people's misfortunes. There are always two sides. It's a zero-sum situation. One person wins, another person loses. So Venus-Jupiter could be about good luck, people getting lucky, but on the other side of the trade, if you like, someone is being unlucky. So that is an unfortunate way of looking at it. Although we can be sort of more positive about it and say this may be an opportunity to be fortunate because of other people. Someone else is unfortunate, but maybe if it's about looking after that person or fixing someone's problem, maybe being paid for fixing that problem. As I think I said in one of my readings for the 12 signs, I think if you're a plumber or you're in a job where you benefit from someone's domestic catastrophes, then that might be how it works. And so hopefully it can be a situation where everyone benefits, but it could be a zero-sum situation with this Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So, and I think we would be unwise to discount the influence of Hades. And so now I just want to look at a few people who, my custom, think about, what does Venus-Jupiter really mean? Who's got Venus-Jupiter in their chart? The Venus-Jupiter conjunction. I am only looking at fairly close Venus-Jupiter conjunctions within 3 degrees. And this allows us to perhaps, to see Venus-Jupiter, for what it really is. And, the Iranian supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Pisces. And so, that sounds such a warm and friendly conjunction, Venus-Jupiter, doesn't it? But, we shouldn't forget that Jupiter is a planet of religion. It can be a planet of religion, particularly in Pisces. It can be, Jupiter might be strong. Ali Khamenei's been very successful. He's got to the top. He's the supreme leader. He's, as I understand it, the spiritual leader in Iran. So that is quite an exalted position. So that is how his Venus-Jupiter conjunction is working. It's not necessarily easygoing, but probably he had to be fairly easygoing in terms of the social, climbing the social ladder, mixing with this person and that person, and ingratiating himself with people in the hierarchy. So that would be how Venus-Jupiter works. But so we should never think that just because someone's got a Venus-Jupiter conjunction that they're a sort of a nice, easygoing, progressive kind of person. Not necessarily. And likewise with Enver Hoxha, the former Albanian dictator who I talked about quite recently. He had a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Virgo. So I think Venus and Jupiter in Virgo may work differently than perhaps in other signs, because Venus is fallen in Virgo, Jupiter is in its detriment in Virgo. So, and Virgo does have a certain connection with communism and socialism and the workers. And so that might be how his Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Virgo is working. And the question is, what is his vision? What kind of vision can you have with Venus and Jupiter in Virgo? It's quite a materialistic vision. I mean, Marxism is a materialistic, I won't say religion, but it's a materialistic ideology. And so that Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Virgo, may have helped Enver Hoxha, maintain his power as Albanian dictator. Now, Jupiter is, of course, a planet connected not just with religion, but it can be connected with law. So, one of the Supreme Court justices, Samuel Alito, has got a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, the US Supreme Court, that is. And so Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius would a level of objectivity there, which you should have if you're a Supreme Court judge. Of course, judges in America tend not to be objective. There's so often, there are always sort of political appointments at one level or another. One of the problems about America, one of the worst aspects of the American judicial system is the fact that judges get elected. That's a terrible thing, because judges don't just get elected. I mean, that sounds a good idea, the people electing judges, but judges get endorsed, and that's the problem. So a judge will be endorsed by a local politician. So some judge, to some county you're in, endorsed by a local politician, endorsed by an interest group. And why do they endorse it? What's the point in endorsing it if judges are neutral? Well, they're endorsing it for a reason. They want judges to support politicians and other vested interests. They want judges to support their view, their projects, and that is often reflected in judicial decisions. Which sometimes don't seem logical. Then you just remember how the system works, and so that's always a problem with. I mean, not just in America, but it seems to be a particular problem in the US. It's but anyway, you're not interested in that. The point is, he does have a Venus-Jupiter conjunction, and so Jupiter, as far as is possible, you could say Venus-Jupiter in Aquarius. Jupiter is helped by Venus, and perhaps in Aquarius that does give him a certain amount of objectivity, and also Venus is a benefic. It's helping him as a judge. It's helping him, get to be a Supreme Court justice. And if you have Venus-Jupiter conjunction, you can certainly be lucky, up to a point. Sean Combs, for example, he's just been on trial. I wasn't really following his trial, and he was found guilty on some things. He was acquitted on other things. I believe he's still in prison. As far as I know, he was considered to be quite fortunate to have got acquitted. I mean, I don't know. My impression was that overall, he was acquitted for the most serious charges, but he does remain in prison. But he is someone who is hugely wealthy, who maybe has been relatively fortunate in the decisions of the court, and he does have a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So that may, in Libra, Venus in Libra in its own sign, and so this might be an example of how Venus-Jupiter conjunction can really work in someone's favour. And also in the music industry, Victoria Beckham, she has a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Pisces. So like Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader in Iran. So she has Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Pisces. Now you could just say Venus and Jupiter, she's just lucky, and she's lucky, but she's also hardworking. As far as I know, she works really hard, and it didn't just appear. Maybe she's a reminder that if you've got Venus-Jupiter conjunction in your chart, it's you can't just sit back and just let the universe just provide all the goods. You have to work hard, and you have to be really pushy and all of that kind of stuff. And so maybe that's how it works for her. And the Venus and Jupiter, she's in tune in water signs. She's in tune with what people want, with the Spice Girls at the time in the 90s. That kind of musical expression was in demand. It hit the right note, and so she was able to be successful, and she continues to be successful. And so she's a good reminder of what you need to do if you've got a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Her Venus-Jupiter conjunction is square Neptune. That could have been a problem, but Neptune, represents the collective, and so perhaps she was able to sort of tune into the collective and, give the collective, what they wanted. And then we have got New York politician Zohran Mamdani. So Zohran Mamdani, I haven't really been following him too much, but he has had this electoral success in terms of becoming mayor of New York. Is that right? And so he has got a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And yeah, that's good, having a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. It's fortunate, but his Venus-Jupiter conjunction is in Virgo. Remember we looked at Albanian dictator Enver Hoxha, who has a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Virgo. And there is a connection between Virgo, as I've already suggested, with socialism, perhaps a redistribution of the workers. And that Venus-Jupiter conjunction, it's a bit mean-spirited. Jupiter in its detriment, Venus in its fall. And so I'm not making any opinion about his politics, by the way. I'm not making any opinion. This is more about perhaps his motivations, and from a psychological point of view, we all want to be successful, but I would suggest that one should not be fooled by Zohran Mamdani. That's no reason not to vote for him, but coming over as this sort of charismatic figure, the face of the future and all of this kind of stuff, that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is very, very calculating. He's thinking about his own interests, and there is a brutality there. Now, he's never going to be, he's not, if he was, with that chart, if you made him, and he was born, I don't know, sort of 90 years earlier, and you put him in charge of Albania, you can imagine what he'd do, of communist Albania. He would do very well as a communist dictator with that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. But I'm not saying he's a communist dictator, by the way. I'm just you have to put him in put him in the right environment. But if you put him in New York, then he obviously can't be a dictator. But you have to understand his motivations, and that there is a certain sort of brutality and a lack of sentimentality about that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. He does what needs to be done, and that can be how it works. And yeah, it can be harsh. And don't forget, he's got Mars in Scorpio, Mercury-Mars conjunction in Scorpio. So and it's on the IC. So I don't think with Zoran Mondani people really know who he is. People have ideas, just talking about him just being charismatic and well. I think he's quite a complicated person, and I think it will take a long time before New Yorkers understand who their next mayor is going to be. And I say next mayor, as far as I know, the polls are saying he's going to win the mayoral election. But he's young, and we'll just see how his political career develops. Of course, I don't believe he can ever be U.S. president because he wasn't born a U.S. citizen. I think that's right. So that's Zoran Momdani. I just want to look at 3 countries that have Venus-Jupiter conjunctions. One of those countries is France. France has a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. If you take the Bastille chart, the fall of the Bastille, I make it 5:30 p.m. There's a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Leo. Now that might say something about the French personality. Venus in Leo. You've got all those stereotypical ideas about France and fashion and looking good. Venus-Jupiter in Leo, with Uranus as well. But it's also a country that is proud with those planets in Leo. But it's lost the vast majority of its empire, but it keeps going on. It tries to make the most of what it has, whether it's New Caledonia or how, it is proud, and it got very upset when it sort of lost control over North Africa over the last few years. And it does hold on. Look at how much how France held on to Algeria, and that's that Venus-Jupiter, with the you see the Algerian War. If you've seen Battle for Algiers, you'll see, if you've seen that film, I would strongly recommend Battle for Algiers, but if you've seen that film, you can see how much France wants to hold on to everything, how it tried to hold on to Vietnam. And that just might be Venus-Jupiter. It could just be a country that is proud and doesn't like to be disrespected, so you could, so if it wants to have a nuclear test in the South Pacific in the mid-1980s and Greenpeace gets in the way, then it'll just blow you up. That's what happened to the Rainbow Warrior. I mean, that's one view of Venus-Jupiter conjunction. I'm not being negative about France, although Venus-Jupiter Uranus, you think about it blowing things up, if you see, in fact, the Battle for Algiers, that ends with something being blown up, with this sort of Algerian terrorists being blown up by the French army. But anyway, I'm digressing, and turning to another country that's got a Venus-Jupiter conjunction is Ukraine, and you can see the persistence of Venus-Jupiter, because like France. Ukraine has got a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Leo. There's incredible pride to Ukraine. I would have said in some respects an unwise pride. I mean, Ukraine does like to talk itself up. And sometimes I'm thinking that Ukraine is too keen to talk about what it's done. If you've done something clever militarily, you don't necessarily want to talk about it. If you've assassinated a Russian general, that's clever. It's not a nice thing to do, but do you talk about it? I think that there was some story that they'd hacked into a Russian submarine quite recently. Again, very clever, but then they want to talk about it. They talk, this talking about stuff, like the summer offensive of 2023, they're talking things up. So that might be some aspect of Leo. But there's also the pride to it. We're not going to give anything up because Venus and Jupiter are in, Venus and Jupiter are in Leo. They are in fixed signs. And Venus and Jupiter can be over-optimistic. We are winning. We are, it's all good. And, Russia is having huge amount of casualties compared with us. Even though when you actually look at the body swaps, it's always far more Ukrainian bodies are swapped for Russian bodies. But still, that could be Venus in Leo. That intense pride will not back down, and so that might be why the war is dragging on, and why they've chosen as their leader sort of Zelensky, this man with Mars in Leo, and so that's one aspect of Ukraine. Another thing about Ukraine, and specifically its Venus. Venus is on the, I think it's a contra anticia of Saturn, and so if you look at Venus and you reflect Venus through 0 degrees Cancer, you get to, I think, you get to 1 degrees 9 Taurus, and so Venus, so here is Saturn, which at 1 degree 31. So that reflection is square Saturn. So I think I've got the right phrase, right? Contra anticium. So the contra anticia of Saturn. So with Venus on contra anticium of Saturn, that kind of suggests some of the negativity of that, certainly one side of that Venus conjunct Jupiter. And also that Venus is, I believe it's on the Mars-Saturn. I'm pretty sure it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Yeah, Ukraine has got, it's got Venus square the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So it's quite a difficult, it's got quite a difficult Venus. But also Ukraine, the time of its declaration of independence, has Jupiter square the Sun-Moon midpoint, and I think we do see that through the course of this war. This optimism, which is always there, Jupiter is optimism, just seeing everything in the best possible light. You can see this in the news flow. Russia sends 100 missiles to Ukraine, and Ukraine says they've shot down 95% of them. Something you almost think it's going to be 105% of them. Sometimes they seem to be able to shoot down more missiles that get sent to them. And of course, it's exaggeration, and I think that the exaggeration of that Venus-Jupiter conjunction, and perhaps a tragedy there with Venus on the contra anticium of Venus, we can see that. And finally, there is the United States. And here is the chart of the United States. And the United States does indeed have a Venus-Jupiter conjunction, not in Leo this time, but in Cancer. And whatever you think about the United States is a very successful country. You cannot deny that. It was formed in 1776. You had a civil war, but it's maintained sort of a continuous and expanding presence, certainly in North America. It's able to, it has a very successful economy. Capitalism has worked. It's a very positive country. I mean, an overwhelmingly positive country, at least from my perspective. It's far too positive, but that positivity you could argue, has worked. And so this is perhaps, and remember, we have a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer now, and with Jupiter in its exaltation, and another good thing about America, it's got Jupiter and Saturn. The great chronocrators. It's got Saturn in the 10th house in Libra, in the sign of its exaltation. And I think that to my mind is about the Constitution and the rule of law, and that somehow the experiment has got through, and we're coming up to 250 years later. I mean, I think that there are problems are starting to emerge, but so far so good. You could say, well, I think that things are starting to fray, but overall, compared to other countries, it has done very well, and that Venus-Jupiter conjunction may be part of it. But perhaps a problem with Venus-Jupiter conjunction is if you take the Placidus house system, it's in the 7th house, and so that could be an enthusiasm for foreign adventures. Plus, Jupiter is a very moralistic sign, a very moralistic planet. This idea, certainly since the Second World War, the idea that there is a good form of government and there is a bad form of government, and imposing those views. I mean, on the face of it, because it's a good thing to do to make people happy. On the reality of it is, it's for United States economic interest. That's how it works. Venus-Jupiter conjunction. But it has perhaps encouraged the United States to intervene too much in other people's countries and societies. And generally, when the United States intervenes, certainly since the Second World War, things don't work out. Look at what happened in Iran with when the US and Britain overthrew the Mossadegh. Was it Mohammed Mossadegh? Was that his name? Was it Mohammed? Anyway, the Mossadegh regime in Iran. All of the problems in Iran are because of that. A democratically elected government was overthrown. We got the Shah, and then after that, imposed by America, and after that, we got the Ayatollahs. And American intervention in Syria after the Arab Spring, millions have died because of that. Totally destabilized Europe. So that's America. But okay, so far so good for America. And this Venus-Jupiter conjunction that we've got coming up at 14 Cancer is right on United States' Sun. And so with that conjunction on the Sun, it's tempting to think, by the way, that the United States has the Sun on Sirius, but you have to remember there is a thing called precession of the equinox. So, in fact, it's like you look at Britain's 1066 chart and you see the moon at 29 Pisces, and you think, oh, England's got its moon at moon on Skeet. But the thing is that because of precession of the equinoxes, we can't really say that that the United States has its Sun on Skeet. Its Sun on Sirius. Well, in fact, you can see that if you actually look at the orb, the United States' Sun is on Sirius, but with an orb of 2 degrees and 19 minutes. I mean, that's miles away. With fixed stars, 2 degrees 19 minutes is just too far away. So just because the United States has its Sun at 13 Sirius doesn't mean it's got... Just because the United States has its Sun at 13 Cancer does not mean that it has its Sun on Sirius. Because of precession of the equinoxes, it doesn't. It's over 2 degrees apart. But still, with this, you'd think that with this Venus-Jupiter conjunction on the Sun, that should look good for the United States. And what does that portend? I mean, hopefully, this meeting in Alaska between Putin and Trump is going to work in everyone's favor. It may be a chance for America to sort of end this war that it started in 2014 with this coup it sponsored in Ukraine, the Maidan coup. Hopefully, that's one way we're going to work out. But I'm not entirely convinced, and one should remember that Jupiter is starting to move away from that conjunction of the Sun, and by the 15th, Venus will be quite a few degrees away. So maybe that Venus-Jupiter conjunction isn't about the meeting in Reykjavik, but not Reykjavik. I mean Alaska. So it's something about America, but it just might encourage America to do something. Or maybe Venus and Jupiter will have an unexpected side effect. Maybe it will do something to America that we weren't expecting, that may not be positive. Are Venus-Jupiter conjunctions and Venus-Jupiter transits always positive? Well, not necessarily. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.